welcome to the Changemakers podcast, where we chat with interesting and engaging individuals here and far about change, making change, living change in their own lives, how they've experienced unimaginable change, and innovative ways people uplift the lives of others. We chat about triumphs over tragedies, mindset matters, and how we live out our life's purpose inspirationally. So please join us to be inspired and empowered to be the change you want to see in this world. You know, we can all be change makers in our lives. Here's to the change you're about to bring forth. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so excited to join you for another episode of our Changemakers podcast. Now we're moving into the video world, and I could not be more excited to be joined today by Nikki Gangemi. Is that correct?
Gangemi.
Gangemi.
Well, very close.
Gangemi, we're going to have an amazing conversation about mindset, the role that it plays, what it is, why we all need to be so diligent on how we monitor and honor our mindset and what that can do and what that can look like into our lives and our businesses. And so welcome today, Nikki.
Thank you, Kimberly. Thanks so much for having me.
Certainly. So let's just dive right on in. And I want you to share with our listeners a bit about yourself and a few insights into your professional journey.
Sure, happy to share. So a little bit about myself. For the longest time since I can remember, my big dream was to be an actress. I spent my whole childhood, growing up, pursuing that, and I finally made the big decision. My first leap of faith and act of courage was moving across the country from New Jersey to California at 23 years old to pursue that career. And what drove me was a breakup. I was with this guy for 5 years, and that just sent me going, let's start life all over again. And after about a year, I gave up on it and I came back home because I guess I didn't fully believe in myself. And when I came back, I didn't know what to do because the only thing I ever wanted to do was act. So my family, coming from a family of teachers, said, oh, just be a teacher. It's a great, rewarding career and all of that. And I said no, but eventually one day I just said yes. And for me, it was a settle, and I settled into teaching, but I stayed there for 15 years and complained about it, but did it, right? And there came a day where I realized that some of the same things that I went through as a kid, and I taught in the same district I went through, they were still going on. Kids were still getting bullied and picked on and excluded. And I said, wow, I can't believe that this is still happening and nothing's really being done about it. And I know, having gone through that myself, that impacted my life in a huge way. It really held me back, stunted my growth, and my self-esteem was mutilated. But I had to do my own work, going through therapy and all kinds of things. And finally, mindfulness, which really taught my brain how to slow down and feel. And so I decided to develop a program, and Mindful Matters began as that. It was to teach kids mindfulness and coping skills to deal with their self-image and stress and anxiety. And I came alive again. I said, for the first time since I acted, I felt like I was on purpose, and I finally had a place in this world. So it ended up, I did a little pivot when I could only take the program as far as I could in teaching. I ended up learning about coaching. I had adults coming to me saying that they wanted to learn this too. So I eventually, when I turned 40, that was another pivotal point. And I looked in the mirror and said, what if nothing changes? I keep saying that I want something more. When is the time? And the time is now. So I made the decision to resign, and that's just over a year ago. And now I'm fully in my coaching business, and I love helping others to do the same, to find that courage, which, by the way, is already inside of you. And move forward.
News alert.
News alert.
Spoiler alert. I love that story. I love that story because I think it can be a lot of our stories, right? I mean, we sometimes start out on one path, and then we move to another path and we fill that out, and we may yet still go to another path. And I remember when I went to see Michelle Obama on her book tour a couple of falls ago. This is 2019, 18, I think, that she said one of the worst questions that she thinks that you can ask a child is, what do you want to be when you grow up? As if there's only one thing, right? So you're getting in the mindset of the child that there are not many options. There's like the one thing, exactly. Which I believe is a disservice. And I'm sure people, I mean, everyone's well intentioned, but I'm curious to understand about your pivot point, which came at mid-career. Would you please give us a glimpse of the feeling of taking a risk to step outside of the certainty and stability of a paycheck, and how you summoned the courage for this bold change making?
Yes, definitely. So I was doing a lot of thinking, right? Just being reflective by nature. I'm a big journaler. I've been journaling since I could remember. And I remember all of a sudden having this epiphany that I followed the rules. I've been a rule follower my entire life. And I followed the stability and certainty model that I was taught, right? Wanting to act, but told you can't major in theater, that's not stable. Major in something that you could, make money at. And so but with that stability and certainty was supposed to come the husband and kids and the white picket fence. At least that's what I was told. But yet somehow that part never worked out for me. That was always a theme in my life that I struggled with. And so looking in the mirror at 40, I said, where's my husband and kids? Maybe I need to do things my way and live life on my terms. And all of a sudden, I realized I felt suffocated. That stability and certainty was more stifling for me. So I realized that my values changed. And all of a sudden, at this next chapter in my life, I valued authenticity and freedom. That was up there. So it only made sense to resign, even though it was scary, because for a while I was saying, well, when I find the guy, when I get married, then I'll be able to follow my dream. And then I realized, no, what if I started questioning, what if I can do it right now, even though I have a mortgage and by myself, even though it doesn't make sense on paper? And I will tell you, Kimberly, that when I was making the decision before putting in the actual resignation letter, I felt a mix of excitement and a little bit of fear, but inside I felt this amazing sense of calm. And in that moment, I knew I'm going to be okay, because I really follow how I feel. That's how I make my decisions.
Yes. Oh gosh, that's amazing. There's so much I could ask about that. I'm a big follower of Abraham Hicks.
Yes, me too.
Oh my gosh, there's an unending reservoir of resources, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the things that Abraham says constantly, and it just, when you said what you just said, reminded me about how the universe, the source of all that is, listens to how we feel, not what we say. So, when we follow a particular path, we get our education, we come out into the job market, we make choices. For every choice, there's a consequence, and there's the unfolding of the path of those choices. And sometimes they're all great. Rarely are they all great all at the same time. It's not linear in any stretch of the imagination. But, I find, and I'm sure you have as well, and I lived this for a number of years, is that as a female, as a woman, we are born and conditioned to follow the rules. That's a scientific fact. That is one of the ways that, society and those in authority of our lives from the age of 0 to 7 They impress upon us, particularly as females, to follow the rules. Males, different scenario.
Right.
But in following the rules, sometimes we're nudged along on our path professionally and in other ways, but professionally, to make choices that we really don't align with, right? And so we can spend years, decades on a path that was ultimately really not of our choosing.
Yes.
Right? And at some point, it's like you wake up. There's just something for the younger women who are listening to this podcast. If you're in your 20s, if you're in your 30s, if you're in your teens, you're thinking, oh, this doesn't apply to me. This is their experience, not you mine. Wait. Just wait. It's coming. We're all kind of on the same path, although it's an individual path, because when you reach the 40s, it's like a knowing comes to you that you've lived maybe half your life, and now you know what you know, and what fit for you back in your teens or 20s or 30 no longer fits. I mean, in my own life, I had become an expert in my chosen field. I had reached the top rung of my career ladder when I was about, well, I self-reclaimed that around 43. And you get restless, and you know that the path that you're on is not the path that you need to be on from that point forward. It may not be the path that you're forever on from that point out, but you just know there needs to be a change. And so I call it the Great Awakening, because we're not the same people, hopefully, that we were in our 20s and 30s or teens, definitely. And so I think that we can lie to ourselves, not intentionally, because of all the conditioning as females of don't rock the boat, don't speak up, don't, you got to follow the rules, you're afraid of hurting people's feelings, you're afraid of mistakes, perfection, whatever. And we end up sabotaging ourselves because we're telling ourselves lies.
Yes, and you just said so much, and I want to add one more thing about that pivotal moment, which is that I had to give myself permission, because being such a rule follower, and not only that, but I received some backlash for saying that I felt like I settled for teaching, because society says, what a rewarding career. You get to make the difference in the lives of children, and you're almost ostracized to say, but that didn't seem to be a good fit for me. That I made myself conform like I did my entire life, but in doing that, you minimize yourself, and I feel like your soul just dies a little bit. So in that moment too, I remember saying to my sister-in-law that January, 5 different people I heard either got sick severely, like with cancer, or died. And it was like back to back to back, including one of the second graders in the school that I was in. And I remember talking, and then a cousin got diagnosed with kidney cancer. And I said, I said to my sister-in-law, if I got his, I can't think of the word, if I was told I had cancer, I'd quit my job today, and then I would build my business. And she said, no, you wouldn't, Nikki, because you'd be too sick. And in that moment, I said, oh my God, why do I need the permission of a diagnosis? How come I can't just do what I want to do because I want to do it, and that's enough? And I said, you know what? It is. I've decided. I give myself permission. And that was a big part of it too, with making the decision.
That is so powerful. For some reason, and there's, again, all this neuroscience studies that support this, but we as women often look externally for permission to live our best lives. And I would just say to our listeners, stop and think. Tomorrow may not come. It may not come. Next year may not come. And the greatest regret in life is not how you've tried and failed. If I don't even believe in failing, but it's learning. And as Oprah says, it's life taking you in a different direction. There is no failing, but it's by not trying. and not staying true to who we truly are. And so that can go into a whole nother line of who we surround ourselves with and the level of positivity or not in our lives, etc. But aligning what our purpose, our true purpose is. And some people never find their purpose because they don't get still enough to listen long enough to listen and hear what life is telling us. Because we all have, like Esther Hicks says, or Abraham says, we're two people. We have the external shell, the personality, the ego that we present and walk around on this plane, this earth plane. And then we have the soul, eternal source, divine source in us. And regardless of whatever your religious persuasion in, this is not religion. This is proven. There is a source greater than ourselves that lives inside of us or lives with us and abides with us. And what that is telling us and directing and whispering. Oprah says it whispers to us and lets us know we're on the right path or the wrong path. And if we don't listen, it gets louder and louder and louder. And finally, this is Oprah, it'll knock you upside the head, maybe with a disease. It will debilitate you in some way because you've not been listening. Right. And so when we reframe our lives to where we can re-listen and honor ourselves, talking about mindset, and not feeling compelled and conditioned to follow the rules and what other people think. And I can tell you from having been raised in the South, that was the number one criteria from my life from 0 to 27 was, what will other people think? Now I couldn't wait to get out of the South, because when I moved to the Northeast and we're so densely populated, and I knew no one really when I moved here. It was such a liberating feeling that I could do and say and be and whatever I wanted because there was no one making that judgment on my life. And so that can be very, very empowering to maybe take us into another direction.
Totally.
So there are so many women, and I'm sure you and I know plenty of them, clients, friends, family, who have outgrown their present career track, yet experience so much ambivalence of taking bold action, perhaps to a different path. Nikki, what would you say to those women?
What I would say is and I'm a big believer in this too, to not focus so much on the action, like the steps that you want to take, but instead to be a little more reflective and start to question all of your beliefs, because it's really our beliefs that dictate the actions that we take. Right? We're never going to outperform what we believe about ourselves. So that has to change first. Somebody did about 2 years ago, somebody said, well, why don't you just quit? I said, what, are you crazy? I've got a mortgage to pay. I'm by myself. That's not something that I can do. That's irresponsible. It wasn't until I changed my values and I changed what I believed on the inside, that happened first. Then the action was just a no-brainer. It was like organic, like this is the next step. So I would say be willing, and this takes courage too, honestly, to take a look at yourself and where can I take some responsibility, some personal responsibility for the choices that I made in my life. And that's where you really gain your power. Because if you're pointing the finger, which I did for many years, and that's why I'm talking about this, it's disempowering, because then you take away your choice when you're blaming. Once you realize, well, okay, what can I be responsible for here? Where can I choose differently? You get this from the inside. You get this feeling of being empowered. And then you will have inspired ideas that you're going to want to be taking action on.
So powerful. It really is. It's sometimes challenging to articulate that process because it's so personal, but at the same time, it's so universal.
It is. It is. And like I said, it's like you mentioned Abraham Hicks, who was always talking about stop bucking the current. And it's like when I feel like when we focus so much on action, it's where you take a few steps forward and then a few steps back and you're muscling through things, and it doesn't have to be hard. But that in and of itself is a belief too. That's something I believe growing up my whole life. Life is hard. My grandmother always said, you know, life's a bowl of cherries. Why do I always get the pits? And it's like having that belief that I was dealt a bad hand, or this is my lot in life.
Right.
All of that inner dialogue, that had to change first.
Yes.
Then the actions will follow.
Yes. And do you agree that do you agree that that comes? There's only really one way that that comes, and that's by being still.
Oh, yes. I say that mindfulness was my ticket out. Growing up, I struggled with OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, and it was those negative thoughts constantly in my mind, which triggered anxiety. And I didn't want to take medication. I tried it. It just was a choice for me. It didn't feel good. When I was introduced to mindfulness and stilling my mind, meditation, yoga, emotional freedom technique, that's where the thoughts started slowing down. And I had these, we don't know what we don't know, right? So awareness is really the first step. And then, like I said, willingness to be, because some people, they will have an awareness and then the walls go up, they shut down, they're like, no, I don't want to hear it. So that's the second piece, being willing to lean into that. And that's another powerful thing too, for anybody who's listening. Embrace fear. When you're scared, like lean into it a little bit. That's how you get into allowing and what's possible for you on the other side of that. I mean, amazing growth and expansion. And you get stronger. Every time you realize that you do something that's scary and you get to the other side and you survive, you're like, wow. And that's how you build your strength. It all comes from within.
And confidence.
And confidence, yes. And happiness. That's another thing. I was on a mission to find happiness, and I thought other people had to make me happy, and I wore people out.
Yeah. Right?
And I had to learn that, you know, happiness is a skill. It's a skill. We're born happy. And just look at baby, right? They're just like so happy. It's a skill that we could develop, but it definitely, I said, it's like taking a vitamin. You take your daily dose of mindfulness every day.
So what does that look like as a practice for you?
As a practice for me, when I wake up, I do not look to the phone and invite the world in. It's like I go downstairs, I make a cup of coffee, I sit with my journal, and I'll just journal. Maybe it's just some thoughts on my mind. Maybe it's a dream that I had I want to write about. I do a little bit of like a meditation. Maybe I'll do some tapping. And then sometimes I'll go for a walk. Like today, I went for a walk in the park. It's a beautiful day. And then I'll check my email. But it's like having that quiet time where it's just for you. And maybe it's listening to an Abraham Hicks video on YouTube, whatever feeds your soul and makes you feel good. I say make how you feel your top priority, but allow yourself that space each day, because I feel that just helps you to show up better for your family, for your friends, for your, whoever, you know, you're at work, right? You've got to give from your overflow.
Absolutely. So more than ever, I've noticed speaking and teaching about mindset has become mainstream. And having worked in the professional services field for quite a while, even maybe 5 years ago, I would have never expected to see the bombardment of mindfulness, meditations, mindfulness Mondays into, you know, law firms, accounting firms, etc. So let's talk for a minute about mindset and its role in change making. And I'm curious what this looks like in your world and the work that you do.
Well, mindset for me is how you choose to see things. It's your perspective. And a big part of that is really getting still and quiet enough just to listen to what is that dialogue. Because from the moment you open your eyes, until you lay your head on the pillow at night, you always have that internal dialogue, and it's always talking. And what you want to be mindful of is, what is the story that you're telling yourself? Because it's the same thing on repeat. Neuroscience says on average we have 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day. I believe it's about 90% of those thoughts are negative. And out of those negative thoughts, 85% are repetitive, which means we are thinking the same negative thoughts day in and day out. What happens is we get so used to them, we acclimate to them that we don't even notice. We don't even notice the thoughts. They're just on a mental loop in the background. So we don't notice them. However, your body feels them. And sometimes, like you said earlier, it takes to get the migraine or the illness that you get diagnosed with. And that's when now you notice it. But what if you could notice it sooner, before it manifests physically? And that's why having a practice where you don't even have to add anything to your day. I like to say, because there's people who say, oh, I don't have time to meditate, I can't sit there cross-legged. So you don't have to. You could make your regular everyday things you do, taking a shower, making a cup of coffee, driving in the car. You can make that a moving meditation where you're just using your senses to experience the coffee, the sound that it makes as it brews through the Keurig, the warmth of the cup, the heat, the smell, all of that. It's a mindfulness activity that everybody has time to do each day. But the more you do that, the more you bring yourself back to the present, where you're playing the role of observer. So instead of judging yourself for, I shouldn't have said that, I shouldn't think that, get out of judgment and just more be the observer. Like I like to say, that's interesting. I'm feeling this, or I'm thinking that. Interesting. I wonder what that means. And then just listen for what comes up.
Listen. I think that, when you think about when we were young girls and going through school, all the school, zero times did anybody ever talk about being still and listening to your inner dialogue, being just still and listen to what comes up. And it's such a disconnect to me that, so much of our lives are directed by our subconscious, which is a whole nother conversation, and our inner dialogue, which you've just very eloquently outlined, drives like 80 to 90% negative dialogue with ourselves. Is it any wonder that we live in a state of contrast and conflict within ourselves? Forget about even the world that we have to deal with, and you don't know where people are coming from, and and all of those bundled up conflicts. It's just amazing we can accomplish anything positive when we have this whole massive current of negativity, internally and externally, bombarding us every day.
Every day. And too, growing up, I don't know about you, but I was told a lot to get over it. And lots of people have it worse. And it almost subconsciously, it makes you think, I'm wrong for feeling this way. And I shouldn't feel this way. And again, that's just beating yourself up. And then you end up with this self-image that's pretty mutilated, for lack of a better word.
It took me to probably maybe 40 or so that I absolutely ban the word should. From my own dialogue, internally and externally, but everybody in my universe. I have a very close family member who's a big should'er. And I said to this person, as it relates to me, the next time you feel that word getting ready to come out of your mouth, zip it, because I don't want to hear it, because the implicated message is you're falling short. Mm-hmm. You're not enough, or you're not, whatever it is not enough. And that's just negative bombardment. And I'm like, I don't allow that in my space anymore.
No, it's good. It's great, because too, when you start feeling that way for so long, that like undeservingness, like you start to wear it like this armor. And I remember recently I had this epiphany, and I said, I have felt so unworthy for so long it's uncomfortable for me to even feel like I am worthy because it's outside of my comfort zone. One person I was speaking to, she doesn't call them comfort zone. She says they're familiar zones because oftentimes it's not comfortable. It's just familiar to you, and we're wired for safety and security. So it doesn't matter if it's not healthy for us, right?
And how sad is that, right? I mean, how sad is, we're here for such a short period of time, universally speaking. And how sad it is to spend one day, much less, decades, thinking these messages of unworthiness or I can't, or all the negative woulda, shoulda, coulda, all those negative dialogues with ourselves, that holds us back from what I believe is our divine purpose, whatever that may be, to shine a light in our world of our unique brilliance. And I'm just so thrilled, honestly, that the concept of mindfulness mindset has become mainstream, and that there are folks like you, who now proactively are out in the world, evangelizing the message that you don't need to stay this way. I mean, everything is possible. Part of mindset that I've learned over the years and in my study is the simple concept of pivoting from the scarcity mindset to the abundance mindset, and that all is good and there's plenty for all of us, whatever it is, that we don't have to compete for scraps, whether that be in our relationships or our professional journey or our physical health or whatever. And the fact that, and I know a lot of people were raised this way, I was probably raised this way, is the growth versus the fixed mindset, meaning, that with the fixed mindset that we think, well, this is just the way I am. I can't do more than what I can do right now because I've always been bad at X, or I've never been good at Y. That's the fixed mindset. The growth mindset, meaning I may not know right now, but I can certainly figure it out, or I'll seek out the resources to teach me how to figure it out. And moving forward from that perspective.
Yes, definitely. And just to add to that with the growth mindset, also questioning everything that you've ever believed. Like, is this really true? Is it a fact or is it a belief? Most often it's just a belief. It's a belief or it's a fear. Really, that's all it is.
So let me ask you, Nikki, and I want to accentuate this, and that is, I'm curious to know, actually, the why in your work. What is it that about it that you find particularly gratifying and rewarding?
Thank you for asking that question. The why. I feel that I've gone through so much in my life, and it's why I'm interested in doing what I'm doing. A long time ago, I was so angry. I was so mad at why did I get the short end of the stick? Why is it that things always happen to me and everybody else gets what they want and I don't? And I realized that was just a learned way of thinking. It was very much a fixed mindset. It wasn't until I learned how to think in another way that I was finally able to move forward on so many levels. It just took me so long. I realized that for a good 20 years, I was standing in the same spot.
Wow.
And as I said earlier, is it scary to quit your job when you have a mortgage to pay and you're single? Absolutely. But what's scarier is realizing that you haven't moved in 20 years. And how many things have I missed out on?
Yes.
And so I realized that with that awareness that I have choice now. And so, yeah, and I just lost track of the question that you asked me, so I'm not sure if I answered.
That's perfect. I mean, that's the why. What is your why?
Right. So now I want to help shorten that gap for others, because I feel, and even had we learned this in school about our thoughts and what to do with those emotions that we feel, there's no reason to get to 35 or 40 and have to look back at your life with any kind of regret and questioning. If we learned that a lot earlier, we'd be in a better position. So I like to help people know their worth, right now and learn how to be happy on the inside so that they can live that satisfied and fulfilled life.
Wonderful. I'm going to have to pause this for just one moment. So that's right. And I love the fact that you, like me, want to shorten the gap, that we don't need to live decades not aligning with our purpose or a growth mindset.
Yes.
Right? And so I love that, because the sooner that we can get into the flow of our lives, and you and I talk about that, read about that so much, and for our listeners who will stop, practice mindfulness, move and transition through awareness from a fixed to a growth mindset, it will absolutely transform a life, every life, any life. So, and I think I see that we are too hard on ourselves, thinking that it's some kind of magic wand, my magic, we were just talking about it, that we can just tap it and it's going to happen. But I've had a coach, a health and wellness coach that I've worked with for years, who likens developing the mindfulness muscle to brushing our teeth. So we brush our teeth hopefully at least once a day, if not more. And so we have to practice through some of the ways that you shared, you know, and it can be driving in the car or commuting or whatever we're doing. We can stop and check in with ourselves anytime, anywhere, and think, are we showing up with the growth mindset that's going to help us move forward, you know, to move us out of fear or the, what's the word? The stuckness, the word's not coming to me, that we often live our lives by default.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, it's getting off of autopilot, right?
Autopilot, right. So, Nikki, this has been so incredibly fascinating, and you know, I'm so grateful that you've joined us today. And so, I want to offer: is there anything else that you would like to offer our listeners about your work, or about programs that you may be facilitating, or anything, the services that you provide that I'm sure that our listeners would want to take advantage of?
Sure. Yes. And thank you for offering that to me. I think the best way to find me is on my website, mindfulmattersliving.com. I'm also on Facebook. I have a free Facebook group, Reprogram Your Mind for Success. So that's a great one to be in. And I'm always doing lots of live trainings. I put them on my YouTube channel that's on the same very topics that we've been talking about, Kimberly.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So thank you so much, Nikki. You know, I certainly am grateful for the connection that we've made, that we're like-minded. I know that each of us is aligning our passion with our purpose of equipping and educating people all over the globe of how to live more in a growth mindset, and in being more mindful of the decisions and the choices that we make in our lives, so we can have greater peace, fulfillment, prosperity. This is not woo-woo. This is science-driven. It's just that it's now becoming more mainstream, and I would say more now than ever in the history of man, with what we all are living through in the COVID pandemic. Do we need more mindfulness in our own lives? So thank you again, and thank you to our listeners, Changemaker listeners, until another episode. Be the change that you want to see in your world.